Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It's Thursday, July 20th, 2023. I'm Greg Carr, sitting in for Roland tonight. Here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. In Alabama, Republicans passed a proposed congressional map that draws intense criticism from black lawmakers. A Legal Defense Fund Political Participation Fellow will be here to help us understand the controversy and its impact on voting rights. Tuesday, we told you about Louisiana's infamous Angola State Prison allegations, highlighting the treatment of primarily black boys detained in the former death row building. The deputy director of the American Civil Liberties Union's National Prison Project will be here to update us on the case. Nikki Fried, head of Florida's Democratic Party, will join us to discuss the state's voting laws, and the president of Kappa Alpha Psi Incorporated, the grand polemark of Kappa Alpha Psi, will explain why they are joining forces to denounce Governor Ron DeSantis' racist policies. And we're looking at the health disparities associated with tobacco-related illnesses in the black community. The president and CEO of Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids will shed light on the critical importance of eliminating menthol cigarettes and the impact it can have on black health. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on Go Roll Roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
Welcome back. In a contentious move, Alabama Republicans advanced a proposed congressional map black lawmakers say does not comply with a court order. After the United States Supreme Court ruling, the state had to withdraw the maps to give black voters a more excellent voice in elections. The new map falls short of establishing a second majority black district required by the plaintiffs who won the court case. Instead, the Republican proposal increases the number of black voters in one district, leading to a heated debate on whether it complies with the court's directive. Legal Defense Fund Political Participation Fellow Brittany Carter joins me from New York City to explain if the new maps directly violate the Supreme Court ruling. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Carter. It looks like these folks are determined, aren't they, just to thumb their nose at Allen versus Milliken. What is going on in Alabama, and why would they even try this, Ms. Carter?
Right. Thank you so much for having me. You know, this is a case that we've been litigating for the past year and a half now. You know, we were defending a win in the Northern District of Alabama, which said that black voters had their votes diluted by the state of Alabama's 2021 congressional map, that they were denied an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. They made that ruling in a very clear, robust 225-page opinion saying that black voters deserve an additional majority black district. The Supreme Court affirmed that ruling, and I think the state of Alabama is trying to see how far their defiance can get them. I think that they still have an interest in diluting black voting power for their own ends, and you know we're really going to fight them every step of the way on this because our plaintiffs and all black Alabamians are still suffering under these attacks on their political power.
And I think on behalf of all of us, thank you for continuing to do this work at Legal Defense Fund. I remember as a young law student, I clerked there one summer with Sherilyn Eiffel, and it's so good to see y'all still on that wall, particularly the sisters, doing this good fight. You know, could you help us in reading the remarks of Alabama State Senator Livingston, Livingston, ironically from Scottsboro? I mean, you can't make this up. he's talking about what opportunity may or may not mean. Are they trying, as some of the folks are saying, to get another bite at this apple by trying to force the Supreme Court to narrow the definition of opportunity or to lay it out? And could you walk us through some of the percentages in District 2 in terms of what they're trying to do and what those who litigated this case in the first place are trying to do in terms of what percentage of black voters in District 2 might be considered putting black folk within the range of having an opportunity to elect someone of their choice?
Right. I mean, I think that that's a really astute analysis, actually, of the kinds of ways that Alabama, the redistricting committee, and the state legislature are trying to work around this very clear affirmance that the Milligan plaintiffs received in the Supreme Court. One of the things that they've been saying in these hearings that they've been having, because they had to come back into special session in order to try to comply with the court's order and address what the Supreme Court told them to do, one of the strategies has been to say, well, we don't really know what the Supreme Court meant when they said that you won, essentially. They said that our map was a violation of Section 2. OK, but that doesn't mean that they told us exactly how to draw this map. And so the percentages that they're putting forward are percentages like 39% in an additional district with 39% black voters, with 42% black voters. But it's very clear from what the Northern District of Alabama said and what the Supreme Court again affirmed is that voting in Alabama is intensely racially polarized. In a district where black voters are 39 and 42%, they do not have an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. And so what senators like that are saying is essentially, well, we think that this is sufficient. There are other communities of interest that we're also taking into consideration that are just as important as black voters, and we think that this is what's fair. And really, it's just outright defiance. The map that our plaintiffs have put forward and that the courts have blessed, because we submitted different examples of plans that Alabama could have drawn when we were in court, and the court said, yeah, you're right, Alabama could have drawn any of those plans. The district has I believe 51%, and there's another one of our plans that it has around 54. But both of these will actually, our experts have proven, will actually give black voters an opportunity to elect a candidate of choice, because that's what the landscape in Alabama requires.
Thank you. Thank you for walking us through that. I know you can't read the tea leaves, but we're going to ask you to anyway. How do you see this playing out, Attorney Carter?
We're going to go back to trial. That's what's going to happen. I think it's a little bit confusing for the average person because after you won in the Supreme Court, I think most people would say, well, where do you go from here? The state of Alabama, your opposing party lost, and they have to follow the directives of the court. But in this situation, the thing that has to happen after you won a decision like this is that the state of Alabama gets the first bite at the apple to sort of go back and remedy their wrongs and to sort of correct their mistakes. The court gives them that privilege, and the court sees, if they're going to do the right thing. In the instance that they don't do the right thing, we have to go to court and sort of litigate exactly how they should do the right thing. We sort of have to make the argument twice. We will definitely do that. We're certainly up to the task. It's unfortunate that they're putting us in this position, but we are defending 2 wins at this point. And so, we will continue to fight and to lift up what the Supreme Court said, what the Northern District of Alabama said, and what the law of the land is. We'll continue to defend the Voting Rights Act.
Absolutely. One final question, because as you walked us through that, it occurs to me, is it possible that, I guess you wouldn't talk about enjoining the current map because they were able to evade that the first time. Are we talking about a rocket docket? I mean, are they going to be able to keep this map in place for the next election cycle when it goes to court? I mean, how does that work?
Well, that's something I don't know. I mean, the first map is already, for all intents and purposes, enjoined, after we won in the lower court and we won in the Supreme Court. That's why they're redrawing the map right now, because the current map could not stand. And so, the outcome of what happens moving forward is really just going to depend on the outcome of trial.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Brittany Carter, on behalf of the Legal Defense Fund, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for continuing to do this work, and we are guaranteed to win because we're not getting off the battlefield. So thank you very much, sis, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for supporting our work.
Absolutely, always. This is Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network, and we'll be right back to continue discussing this issue.
For decades, the tobacco industry has deliberately targeted Black communities and kids with marketing for menthol cigarettes. It's had a devastating impact on Black health. Tobacco use claims 45,000 Black lives every year. It's the #1 cause of preventable death. In the 1950s, less than 10% of Black smokers used menthol cigarettes. Today, it's 85%. Ban menthol cigarettes. Save lives.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
On the next A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie, we're talking all things mental health and how helping others can help you. We all have moments where we have struggles, and on this week's show, our guests demonstrate how helping others can also help you. Why you should never stop giving and serving others on a next A Balanced Life here on Black Star Network.
Hello, I'm Paula J. Parker. Truly proud on the Proud Family, Louder and Prouder on Disney+. And you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Back here on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and we're going to discuss this Alabama case with our Thursday night panel. It's always good to see my sister, although I don't appreciate the fact that I'm sitting in this seat, and I think probably you should be sitting here, but that's all right. Reese Colbert, host of the Reese Colbert Show on Sirius XM and queen of all platform media. I saw you on TikTok today, sis. Oh, my goodness. And we're glad to be joined from the state of Florida by Brother Drew Brown, Dr. Drew D. Brown, who is an assistant professor of African American Studies, Sociology, Criminology, and Law down there at the University of Florida. Good to have you, Brother Brown. Reese, I want to start with you. What do you make of this? What's the political play here in Alabama?
Well, first of all, you look good in that chair, Dr. Carr. I'm so happy that you're hosting. I was like, ooh, you're hosting is such a treat. But, I think what the play is who gonna check me, boo, once again. The whole fallacy of the Supreme Court being supreme is only when the rulings are convenient for the people that don't need to play by the rules. The Democrats always play by the rules. And so regardless of how egregious and how appalling the rulings are, like, for instance, overturning Roe v. Wade, like what they've done so far to gut Voting Rights Act, the Democrats are going to continue to play ball with the Supreme Court. On the other hand, with Republicans, they're seeing that the rules are whatever the hell they make them. And they're also seeing that if they don't get their big win the first time, they're going to go back to the same people that have shown an appetite to rule in a way that's favorable to them over and over again. So being funny about opportunity this and, well, is opportunity 30% or is it 40%? You know what the hell damn opportunity means. It means that Black people get an opportunity to, not opportunity, but they get the right, essentially, to influence the elections as opposed to their votes being diluted. And so they're going to play stupid and they're going to play like, oh, that's not really what I'm after. That's exactly what they're after, because they play for keeps all the time, every time. And when they lose, they don't pack up their things and go home. They get right back on the field. And that's what we need to be doing as well.
Absolutely. We got to get back on the field. I know y'all got to be tired down there in Florida, Dr. Brown, because y'all haven't had a chance to have a break, and school's about to start again. You've been on the battlefield nonstop. It looks like demographically, at some point, there's going to be a tipping point. You can't really continue to run this kind of game and expect the same result. What's your perspective on this? I mean, we just heard Reese kind of lay out their strategy and what they're planning to do, but this has national implications. Any thoughts on what's going on in Alabama and how this might play out, even influence stuff going on nationwide? And it's good to see you, brother.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see you too, and thanks for having me on. I got to say that when I see things like this going on in Alabama, it's not new. We have to first understand that. But also, these things are going to continue to happen. The Republicans are going to continue to try to sidestep these rules and these laws and get away with as much as they can get away with. I do feel as though they make up their own rules at times, and that's why we have to constantly be battling against these things. But I think it's also important to understand what's at stake here, right? That these laws are essentially robbing Black people and brown people, for that matter, from having the power of the ballot. And Democrats are always, and others are always talking about how we need to use our vote to fight off different folks or different groups and things like that. But now we're being robbed of the ability to even do that. Malcolm X also said that we need to use the vote as well. But the difference with Malcolm X and what he said in his speech, The Ballot or the Bullet, is that he was saying that the ballot is like a bullet, and we should throw our ballot when we see our target. And if the target is not in reach, then we should put our ballot back in our pocket. Well, this type of redistricting is putting the target out of reach. And we have to continue to fight to get the target in reach so we can put our votes and use that power.
No, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I want to stay with you for a second here, brother, on this, because, as you mentioned Malcolm, it made me think about the fact that we did use our ballots in the gubernatorial election that put Andrew DeSantis in office, and it was razor thin, and that's because one of the reasons they stopped counting. I mean, if they had kept counting, we might be talking about Governor Gillum. And then, of course, they're governing as if there's a landslide in Florida. Could you maybe walk us through, and then I'm going to ask Reese the same question. This attempt to say that 30% or 38% creates an opportunity, do the percentages translate into voter participation? Or is there a difference between, okay, you've got X percentage of people in this district, in the Northern District, or in District 7, where we have, of course, Terry Sewell. But if you don't come out to vote, how important is making sure that a majority of that percentage turns out and votes?
I think it's a tremendous difference. However, we have to understand that this is not the only play that folks are making, right? This redistricting is not the only thing that they're doing. They're also doing other things like voter intimidation, right? Which we'll probably talk about a little later, especially down here in Florida, looking at different ways to suppress these votes. That on the one hand, folks are saying, well, this should give an opportunity for people, but on the other hand, they're doing other things to suppress even that aspect of the vote. And so I think that a lot of these things are happening and a lot of double talk is happening. But when it comes down to it and you really look at the facts, the fact of the matter is that a lot of the Democratic vote, a lot of the Black vote is being suppressed in a multitude of ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Reese, you walked us through some of those ways and consistently told us, kind of helped us understand how this combination that Dr. Brown is talking about shows up. In your mind, what percentage, roughly speaking, would maybe guarantee some sense of being able to say that there's an opportunity there to take that district? And we know the National Redistricting Foundation, we heard Ms. Carter talk about a 54% or a 51%. Politically, in combination with some of the things that Brother Brown is talking about, in your mind, what would satisfy that threshold? Because clearly that seems like that's what they're going to litigate.
Well, you need at least 50, because to be honest, people don't be voting. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if people activated to our capacity, then sure. 35%, 38% would make the difference. But we know that that doesn't happen, in large part because people do recognize that there is voter suppression, in large part because people do not feel like they actually have the power to influence their election. So it's kind of putting the cart before the horse when you are, whatever, however that saying goes, to try to say, well, everybody vote, and then that way you can influence elections, when they've seen for decades now that that's not actually how it happens. And so if you want to guarantee it, then you got to go at least 50%. You know what I'm saying? But what I can guarantee is that whatever percentage that Republicans are putting forward is the percentage that they feel comfortable will not do the trick. So you got to add at least 5, 10, 15 points to whatever Republicans are starting at, and maybe they're going to try to lowball it, but they really think they'll land at 42%, and that's still not enough. Whatever they're suggesting, that ain't it. That's what I do now.
No question. I hope everybody's taking notes and heard that very clearly. If they're comfortable with it, then clearly they have thought this out. So we know this is not just an arbitrary number they're coming up with. Thank you, Reese. That's important. We're going to take a break here and go to our break. And when we come back, we'll pick up on the other side and then continue our conversation of the news of the day here on Roland Martin. Roland Martin Unfiltered will be right back after this break. And you're watching the Black Star Network. I'm Dr. Greg Carr, and coming up on the next Black Table, thinking about the Black freedom movement in a global way. Dr. John Monroe joins us to discuss his book, The Anti-Colonial Front, which maps the social justice movement in the United States and its impact internationally, from Asia to Africa, and how movements like anti-communism were used to slow down racial equality, like critical race theory today.
Critical race theory today, communism back then, is essentially mobilized to shut down any challenges to a given system of power.
Connecting the civil rights movement to colonialism on the next Black Table, exclusively here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
I'm Dr. Greg Carr, and coming up on the next Black Table, thinking about the Black freedom movement in a global way. Dr. John Monroe joins us to discuss his book, The Anti-Colonial Front, which maps the social justice movement in the United States and its impact internationally, from Asia to Africa, and how movements like anti-communism were used to slow down racial equality, like critical race theory today.
Critical race theory today, communism back then, is essentially mobilized to shut down any challenges to a given system of power.
Connecting the civil rights movement to colonialism on the next Black Table, exclusively here on the Black Star Network.
Me, Sherry Shepard, with Sammy Roman.
I'm Dr. Robin B., pharmacist and fitness coach, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered. On Tuesday, we told you about the emergency motion filed in Louisiana about the treatment of juveniles, mostly black boys, detained in Angola's infamous former death row building of the nation's largest adult maximum security prison. The complaint alleges that children are being placed in mandatory solitary confinement for 72 consecutive hours when they arrive, only being released from their cells for a few minutes to shower. I think it's 8 minutes, punishing children with being locked in their cells for over 23 hours, only let out to shower in handcuffs and shackles. Being handcuffed and shackled is punishment even when they are allowed to go outside for recreation time. The filing also cites evidence of extreme heat in the individual cells where children are confined, which do not have windows or air conditioning. Joining me now is Tammy Gregg, Deputy Director of the American Civil Liberties Union's National Prison Project. Welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered, Director Gregg. Please give us an update. What is going on? And we know what's going on in Louisiana, but please tell us, how are you all fighting back and how can we help? Please, it's good to see you.
Yes. Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to share the horrific conditions that the children are being confronted with. First of all, I'd like to say that the kids, and I thank you for your segment earlier in the week, but you have one thing that the public needs to remember, that these are children. They haven't been convicted of crimes. They are in crimes that are equivalent to the adult system, where people might be incarcerated in an adult facility like Angola. They belong in their homes, or they belong in juvenile justice secure facilities where they're being provided with education, where they're being provided with rehabilitation, and they're being provided with treatment and services. These are all promises that the state made to these kids. They made to their parents when they took possession of them, and they made to this court almost a year ago. And our evidence, based on conversations with the kids that are very recent, within the last week and a half to 2 weeks, demonstrate that the things that you highlighted, the exposure to excessive heat, the lack of education services, the lack of services, special education services, a lack of recreation, being shackled, all of those things are happening real time. And so what we've done, as you noted, was we filed an emergency motion in court asking the court to immediately evaluate these issues. And we have to demonstrate that they're occurring currently, and we believe that they are. And we asked the court to remove them from Angola and from any adult facility because they don't belong in the adult system, and certainly not a system that's maximum security and is on the grounds of a former plantation and convict leasing site.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you noted, you all have been punching back on this since almost a year ago, August, right, when you filed. I'm trying to understand, I think we would all try to understand this. When the judge said that certainly putting them in Angola, which of course, as we know, is historically infamous, we know, yes, perhaps the worst prison, certainly there aren't any worse, in the United States of America, named for where they took us from in West Central Africa. That's how bad it is. But when the judge says, yeah, it could likely cause psychological trauma and harm, but then follows us up with the threat of harm these youngsters present to themselves and others is intolerable. What are we supposed to make of something like that, particularly as you said, because they're not convicted of anything and what they suspected of doing or whatever is civil, not criminal? How can how are you reading what the judge said a year ago?
So I was there. We had a 3-day proceeding, and the state—
I'm sorry, maybe I think my head— did you say 3 minutes?
3 days, I apologize.
Oh, 3 days. No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear. I thought, I was like, I know just, my God. Okay, a 3-day, okay, please, I'm sorry. Walk us through this 3 days, all right.
A 3-day hearing where we put on evidence from a juvenile justice expert, well-respected throughout the country, a child psychologist, and we presented evidence of the harms that you mentioned, both psychological, physical, emotional, and just the fact that this is not the model that Louisiana should be following. And the state did a really good job of showing pictures that were not attributed to any individual, but showing property damage. They talked about escapes and elopements of the children, and they said that these children essentially were incorrigible, and they were disrupting the services they were providing to the other kids in the juvenile detention setting. And for the sake of these children and the public, they needed to give them more intensive treatment. And so that was the justification. In addition, the state made a promise that if they put the kids in this setting, that they would do it for a short period of time, and that they would provide all of the services kids would get if they were in a juvenile setting, the appropriate setting, versus Angola. All of those promises have been broken. As you see in our filing and the testimony we present from the kids, not one of those promises have been kept, including having access to their parents and their families. Visits have been very limited. At one point, a state official testified that if they had to, they would get a bus and make sure that the kids had access to their families because they would bus their families in to see them. That has not happened once. These kids are not seeing their families.
That is, I mean, we say it's surprising, but we live in America. I mean, this is unbelievable. So you're once again into the breach. What can we do to support, and what do you expect is going to happen now?
So the court has ordered that we have another hearing based on the present conditions that we are alleging that are problematic on August 15th. We're not sure of the length of the hearing, but it starts on the 15th, which we are very grateful to the court for giving us a hearing so quickly under the circumstances. And so we're gathering evidence now, going through sort of the legal dynamics of getting things in place so we can prove our case at trial and show that the kids are likely to suffer from irreparable harm and that this is deliberately indifferent, which is a legal standard that we have to demonstrate. And as for what folks can do to support this, people who live in Louisiana, people who live in other states who have children, you can reach out to the governor's office. There's a petition that's being circulated on your internet, and let him know that this is not right. Louisiana is the only state in the entire United States that's ever done anything like this. You don't want to be notorious for that or have that legacy. You're already dealing with a state that is failing families and children through the low educational opportunities and achievement, the severe poverty rate in the country. It's one of the lowest. All of these statistics are amplified when we're talking about Black and brown children. And so it's already a travesty. It's already a legacy that I would hope no one would like to have as an elected official, that actually should pledge instead to provide services to these kids, to give them the best opportunity to achieve and be healthy, producing adults.
Absolutely. Tammy Gregg, Deputy Director of the American Civil Liberties Union National Prison Project. We can't thank you enough for not only your service, but for fighting this ongoing fight. And Roland's going to continue to follow up on this, so we'll be asking you back, I'm sure, soon for updates. Thank you, and thank you for helping us understand how we can get involved as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's go to our panel for a moment. Dr. Brown, I'll start with you because one of your areas of expertise and scholarship is in criminology. What do you make of this, brother?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely ridiculous. A clear violation of the Eighth Amendment.
I was going to ask about the Eighth Amendment. I just figured it wasn't in the Constitution no more, brother. That's when.
You know, I think this idea of cruel and unusual punishment, they must be banking on the fact that this is not necessarily unusual when we're talking about prisons in America, this poor treatment, right? That I was going to say in 2016, you know, the Justice Department, the Bureau of Prisons announced that they were going to do a sweeping overhaul of prison conditions and focus on reform. Unfortunately, this isn't necessarily happening with the level of urgency that we would like to see it. Yes, we have different instances like earlier this year, San Quentin announced that they were going to do more rehabilitation and things like that. But I guess they're pushing this with all deliberate speed, as they said in Brown versus Board of Education, which basically means they're going to do it on their own time as long as they're moving forward in increments. But this is ridiculous, the way that we need such monumental reform just to reach a level of human decency and treatment, let alone reach and address rehabilitation with much needed therapy and education and development for these youth.
Absolutely. I want to follow up, man, because, of course, you know better than I do how infamous the name Angola is. I mean, the Angola 3, Brother Albert Woodfox, and so many. Is Angola an outlier, or is this symptomatic of some? I mean, we've certainly seen some of the cases that Roland has covered over the last few months, you know, these filthy conditions in jails and juvenile. Is this an outlier, or where does this fit in the context of incarceration, particularly as it relates to young people in this country, in your mind?
Yeah, it certainly is one of the worst. If not the worst that I've recognized. but we can't say that it isn't a part of a larger system. We can't say that it isn't a symptom of a larger issue. It certainly is part of the culture of America to really look at youth and look at people as criminals and then strip them of all humanity, right? Look at young Black boys and treat them as if they are criminal adults that we want to strip them of their humanity. I think that this is certainly one of the worst. Angola, I think, as much as I've seen, is one of the most egregious examples of that. But it's not that it's not happening in different ways in other areas as well.
Okay, yeah, man, this is crazy. Reese, certainly this is something that people would say that political action is necessary, state level, federal level. In your mind, what should we be doing now? And we see them, they're in the courts battling. She's saying write the governor, as a petition. But in your mind, how do we fight this? How should we be thinking about this in terms of attack?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's a role for all of us to play. First, people want to know how this affects them. We have a to me, bad attitude sometimes about, well, them's the rules, that you did the time, now you got to pay the crime. But if you care about the law, if you care about the rule of law, then you should care about the fact that by law, these juveniles should not be in Angola to begin with. They are not subjected to punitive punishment based on the law that people claim to care about, making sure that that law gets followed. So keep the same energy for the people who are entrusted with public safety to actually enforce those laws for themselves and for the standards with which they treat people. Because what we're talking about is 14 through 18-year-olds being subjected to unnecessary trauma, going back in the world, and you wonder why 14-year-olds is bopping you upside your head and carjacking people because of shit like this. And so if you care about public safety, even if you don't care about humanity, which you should, but if you don't care about that, you should at least care about the fact that one of the most people that go to jail, or a large number of people who are in jail, have actually recidivated. They have actually gone back to jail after multiple offenses. So at 14 through 18-year-olds, we should be focused on, like one gentleman in the story, he has been held up getting his diploma because they are not offering the kind of educational services at Angola that they would get at a juvenile center, which I'm sure isn't even that great in that case. But if you don't want to create lifelong traumatized people who are inevitably likely to continue to put themselves in situations that can cause harm to others, then this is a story that people should be activated on. So again, that is the same way that people tweeted and they said that I want my tweet back because Carly Russell wasn't really missing. Yes. The same way that y'all had that energy for the tweets, the same way y'all have energies for commenting and saying whatever the situation may be, take that energy, go fill out a template and email, write, send a letter, whatever situation may be, call, that's still a thing, and make sure that people hear your voice. Because if you speak up, then they have no choice but to act, because this is something that has been going on for far too long. But the children should be where, at a minimum, people should draw the line.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it really, I mean, it's beyond disturbing. I mean, we start talking about children who they let them outside and they say, we don't have a ball or anything, we just kind of sit out here, and that's only for a few minutes. And then they say, the state has offered to send things in, send a bus in to bring the families in, they're isolated, and the court just seems to have these folk hostage. Dr. Brown, I mean, as you said, I mean, it seems like it may be the worst, and maybe one of the worst. But you're down here in Florida, and in a minute we're going to talk about returning citizens being intimidated and not being allowed to, or at least feeling that they're not allowed to participate in the political process. How much should we be concerned about stigma as it relates to these young people? They're at an early moment in their lives, and clearly, whether or not they triumph, and we're going to continue to fight until they do get triumph, released, or move somewhere else, can this follow them? I mean, is this something, the kind of thing that can scar somebody or imprint them for the rest of their lives?
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel like I'm traumatized just listening to the stories about these young Black boys, right? These teenage boys, that it really does bring me back to my teenage years and some of the things that I went through. And so hearing those stories now, going through it, of course they're going to have some issues or some trauma that's going to follow them probably for the rest of their life, for a lot of them, unless they're going to go through some type of therapy and things like that. But even still, trying to wrestle with this, I mean, you got to think that when we were going through the pandemic, there was so much that we did to try to protect people. And then here we have a situation where these young boys are in a situation that can easily be preventable, and they're not being protected. Their health is not being protected. That's ridiculous. And what it goes to show you is how much we value Black youth, how much we value Black young people who are going to go forward and be the future of our communities, of our society, and what we believe is going to happen with them. I think that this is indicative of the way in which we're ready to, not us, but the way in which our society is ready to just toss away Black youth any chance they get.
Absolutely. Facts. Well, we're going to pause here, and we'll come back on the side of the break to take our next story. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network, and we will be right back.
Next on The Frequency with me, Dee Barnes, actress, writer, and advocate Redrawn Chong is here to discuss her childhood and break down her life in Hollywood, a show you don't want to miss.
Well, even at my peak when I was getting a lot of stuff, as soon as I was working a ton, I heard people whispering, oh, we don't want to pay her because we're giving her a break.
Only on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, Dexter Jenkins is a faith-based financial mentor with more than 20 years in the financial services industry. He's passionate about helping families build generational wealth.
Even though I'm talking about things like prayer, I'm talking about things about reading the word, I'm talking about things like fellowship, I'm talking to members who are dealing with losing their houses, or I'm talking to members who, because of a lack of the handling their finances, they're working 2 and 3 jobs. And so what I'm finding is that they're not coming to church because they don't have a handle on their finances.
We're talking how to get wealthy through faith and our finances on the next Get Wealthy, right here, only on Black Star Network.
I'm Faraji Muhammad, live from LA, and this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me, we talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together, so let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
I am Tommy Davidson. I play Oscar on Proud Family, Louder and Prouder.
Right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. During today's House of Representatives subcommittee hearing on the weaponization of the United States government, United States Virgin Islands Representative Stacey Plaskett blasted House Republicans for giving a platform to presidential candidate and vaccine conspiracy theorist Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr.
I know that we talked earlier about a post that Mr. Kennedy had at the beginning of the Biden administration. I just want the record to reflect that that post has not been taken down. So I'm wondering about the extent of censorship when the post is still there. But more importantly, again, I go back to just the fact that we are creating a platform for this kind of discussion, not about the censorship, not about free speech, but the content of some of that speech that we are amplifying in this room. I'm appalled and just so troubled by colleagues that I have to work with, that these are individuals who would bring a witness who's promoted a video that compared the COVID vaccine to the Tuskegee trials. The Tuskegee trials were a very difficult time in Black America, where individuals who were already sick with a disease were then reviewed, experimented on who already had a disease to see how far that disease went. And making the comparison that manipulates and preys on Black people's feelings about the atrocities of the past in order to prevent them from seeking life-saving vaccines in the present. And knowing that this is dangerous, I cannot also be unaware that this comes from an individual who, by Mr. Roy's introduction, is very smart and understands the implications of this. You know, Mr. Kennedy's own family decries his stance on vaccines, and families disagree on a lot of things. I got family members that, you know, we all disagree, so that doesn't mean anything. But the fact that he has famously sent a request to a party guest that they had to be vaccinated to come to his party. And I'd like to introduce into the record a letter from Louis Silkin, a law firm representing Mr. Kennedy, which states, as he has stated repeatedly, he vaccinated all his children, and I'd like that to be introduced into the record, but tells the Black community and myself, a mother of 5 Black children, that I should really be careful and not necessarily have the same safeguards to protect my family, my children, from a virus that has killed millions of people because I'm Black. There's no secret that this is an amplification of his own platform. You know, I'm not going to talk about the money that's received from the Children's Health Defense, from his anti-vaccine organization that's responsible for a majority of the false information out there about COVID, and the notoriety that's gained from it by manipulating Black and other vulnerable communities to propagate these pseudosciences.
Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, who has done your woman's duty on this subcommittee. Of course, she would not go unchallenged, even as she has lived rent-free in the head of the next speaker you will hear, the pride of Troy, Ohio, from the 4th Congressional District, Subcommittee Chairman, and a lot of other things, Jim Jordan, who invited Robert Kennedy Jr. and other witnesses to testify about the supposed censorship of various views by tech companies in the federal government. While Plaskett criticized Kennedy's remarks about COVID-19 being ethnically targeted and a Tuskegee experiment comparison, as we heard, here is how Kennedy responded to Plaskett.
I'd like to just respond briefly to some of the, what I would call defamations that have been just applied to me by the ranking member. I'm happy to talk to you about my opinions on these issues, what you have stated and tried to associate me with through guilt by association is simply inaccurate. Virtually everything, every statement that you just made about me is inaccurate. I have never advised Black Americans not to receive vaccines. At one point you say I'm anti-vax, and that's a bad thing. The other moment you point out that all my children are vaxxed. I'm fully compliant with the vaccine schedule myself, except for COVID. I took flu vaccines for 20 years straight. I have never been anti-vax. I have never told the public avoid vaccination. The only thing I've asked for, and my views are constantly misrepresented, so that the truth of what I believe is not, we're not allowed to have a conversation about that with the American people, which I believe vaccines should be tested with the same rigor as other medicines and medications. You tried to associate me a moment ago with the replacement theory, which is racist.
No, I did not say you had the replacement theory. Time belongs to the gentleman from
my colleagues.
Time belongs to the gentleman from.
I denounce that theory. It is racist, and I have never endorsed it or had any association with it. Our film on a medical, by the way, Bill Buxton, who is the Black CDC official who ultimately exposed the Tuskegee experiment, tried for years and years to appeal to CDC to stop it for 40 years. Finally, he got relief by walking into my uncle's office in the building next door. Teddy held hearings and ended the experiment. I remember that very well. And to say that I created a film that encourages blacks not to get adequate medical care is just completely abhorrent.
Don't misuse my words.
It's the witness's time. Do not censor the witness.
I'm not censoring the witness. I'm not censoring the witness. He's still talking.
It's my time, and I've given it to the witness. Do not censor him.
I'm not censoring him.
If the views that you and others have applied to me, I've attributed to me, if they were actually true, I can see why I shouldn't be able to testify here today. Those are not true. These are defamations and malignancies that are used to censor me, to prevent people from listening to the actual things that I'm saying. And I think, Ranking Member, that we should have a real conversation rather than an exchange of ad hominem attacks. And answer very quickly to your question, the term malinformation was coined to describe information that Facebook and Twitter and the other social media sites understood was true, but that the White House and other federal agencies wanted censored anyway for political reasons because it challenged official orthodoxies. I'll give you one example. I was included in a group called the Disinformation Dozen. And Facebook and others were asked to censor us, which they did. And by the way, my Heck Aaron post, it was taken down. My whole Instagram account with 900,000 people was taken down because of that. Oh, they knew, Facebook knew that the Disinformation Dozen claim, and what they said was the Disinformation Dozen came from this very shady group called the Center for Preventing Digital Hate in England that is funded by dark money that should be looked into. They claim that 65% of the vaccine misinformation on the internet was generated by those 12 people. Facebook itself said that is impossible. That is false information. We know that not to be true. And yet, when the White House asked them to censor this Disinformation Dozen, including me, they did it anyway when they knew it to be untrue.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Well, our beloved Reese, you have been trying to help us understand how weaponized ignorance and misinformation works. What do you make of, I think the young people call it platforming, something like that? And I mean, what did we just see, and how dangerous is it, not dangerous? What's your take on what we just saw, Reese?
Well, first of all, he's full of shit. And the first thing people want to do when they get caught red-handed is be like, you're lying. I don't know where you got that from. No, she didn't just pull it out of her asshole. She had the receipts, and all you had was bullshit that you could barely get out. So I don't think so. The fact of the matter is that he, along with others, have targeted the Black community with laser-like precision with disinformation. And the reason why it's called disinformation is because it is intentionally either recontextualizing in a way that is misleading, or it is intentionally giving people incorrect information. And what I've said that's really important to understand about disinformation in the past is it's not that it is 100% patently false. What it is that you take something that might have a slither of truth to it, and then you put it in a completely different context, or you put other things around it that make it have a different meaning than if you actually kept it in its entirety in its original context. For instance, when you see a clip that's 15 seconds that looks bad, for instance, well, the 15 seconds before and the 50 seconds after it might completely change the message of that clip. But if all you're running with is this particularly selectively edited thing, and somebody selectively edited it to manipulate you, that's disinformation. And so the idea that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is some altruistic actor who's out there trying to save the Blacks from vaccines that are harming us, when, like she said, your kids is vaxxed, you want people at your party to be vaxxed, and so you're talking out of one ear, talking out of the side of your mouth, and you're doing something on the other side. And so don't fall for the okie doke. I know that the COVID wars and the vaccine wars was popular. Some people still ain't vaxxed. That's fine. We're over it. Good luck. If you made it this far, I'm sure you're going to be all right. We're not arguing with that shit no more. But at the time, this was a situation where Black people were disproportionately killed from COVID, who were disproportionately sicker from COVID, particularly when it came to Black mothers dying at a disproportionate rate already, bigger than the Black maternal mortality rate. And we were being targeted with this disinformation. The medical apartheid, you've had Black doctors who came out and said that they gave an interview under completely different circumstances, and their words were chopped and screwed to give a different opinion or different view. And so he cannot be trusted. And if you don't take away nothing else I said, this is a person who's trying to run for president of the United States, right? Thanks. He's not going to get the nomination, but that's fine. Mm-hmm. If the Republicans thought that this person was credible in any kind of way, yes. If the Republicans thought, hey, if this guy got the nomination, he would be good for our country, he would be in opposition to our platform, the Republican Party would not, Jim Jordan's funky ass would not be inviting RFK Jr., giving him the platform of a congressional hearing. They would not, under any circumstances, be doing that if they felt that he was at all a threat to the Republican orthodoxy, to their white nationalism, and to their threat to the Black community and Black humanity. So if you don't take nothing else, you don't have to trust anything that I have to say about the situation, about COVID or the vaccines or whatever. But do you trust the Republicans? Do you think that the Republicans are platforming a person that is in your best interest as opposed to in their best interest?
Absolutely. We're going to go to break in a second, but I want to see if I could just squeeze in maybe a minute for Dr. Brown, because you are, sir, in a state where I think we were all sending prayers to Florida, because they damn sure tried not to even close down for a split second. I know we had a lot of students running down there for spring break and everything else. How dangerous is this, brother? I mean, and as Reese said, for people who say, well, I made it through and I'm not sick. I mean, we are still, a lot of Roland Martin Unfiltered is still remote in the wake of COVID. I mean, how do you filter this? And what should we be taking from this, as Reese has kind of laid out the dangers of misinformation?
Yeah, she's done a great job of doing it. And I definitely, my hat is off and got to thank Congresswoman Plaskett for checking RFK Jr., because we can't let this stuff go unchecked. And she was very careful to say she's not against free speech, but she can't believe the way in which they're giving so much attention to this, right? We really should be checking this, because what this does is it creates a belief system. It creates a culture where people are starting to, where this snowballs and people will start to believe these things and then start to dismiss the very thing that is killing folks, disproportionately killing Black folks, right? And so I think that to be able to shut that down and call this misinformation right then and there, certainly want to thank her for that. And that's exactly what it is. I think we need to continue to do that, continue to shut this stuff down. No, we're not against free speech, but we want to be able to shut down misinformation when we can.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Brown. Well, when we come back from the break, we're going to be talking about Florida a couple of times in a row here. So you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys. This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind $100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches. I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Farquhar, executive producer of Proud Family.
Bruce Smith, creator and executive producer of The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder. And you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Remember to download the app, the Black Star Network app, and to continue to spread the word about the Black Star Network. And as Roland would say, and no doubt is saying somewhere in social media as we speak here, smash the damn like button. I think that's probably what he would say at this juncture. So I'm just going to channel my inner Roland Martin. You know, so much is going on in Florida. Florida continues to be in the headlines with its racist practices. Dr. Brown, I know your university, and I think about my good friend Dave Canton down there, chair of Black Studies and African Studies at U of F. A number of job offers went out. You got 5 positions down there. People not trying to come to Florida. I see now something very similar is happening in Texas. Certainly, Roland's covering, of course, what's happening at Texas A&M. Any thoughts on the climate generally in Florida as we begin to turn toward discussing everything from voting rights to reinstating the rights of our returning citizens to the lawsuits that are currently being filed? I mean, give us a temperature check to the degree that you can there in the Sunshine State.
Yeah, I can tell you there's so much going on down here. And the folks that are engaged in it are having to sort of juggle all of these things at the same time because there's so many things that are happening. I do feel like when it comes to the climate down here that I wish there was more. I wish there was more stuff going on. I wish there was more resistance to some of the things that are happening. I wish there was more action taken towards these things because what ends up happening is that something happens, and if that's not checked, if that's not fought against and resisted, then the next thing happens. Then the next thing happens. First, it was the AP course for African American Studies, and then comes the HB 999 legislation that comes down, and then comes the next thing, and it's like, whoa, the train pulled out many times before, and now we're worried about it when it's almost at full speed. Well, it's going to be hard to stop then. So we really need to get a handle on some of these things that are going on and address them in an appropriate way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Reese, I listening to Dr. Brown there and thinking about, you know, this onslaught, this relentless onslaught, one thing after another, after another, after another. As somebody who is hardwired into how we resist politically and across the board, and as somebody who sits at the center of a number of media spaces and kind of takes the temperature of our folk on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, really, how important is it for us to kind of factor in that fatigue? And when we do have platforms, I mean, I say this tongue planted slightly in cheek, So our brother Bakari Sellers decided that he was going to, dance around and try to do his best impression of Van Jones. Hey, how important is it for us to factor in fatigue? Because it seems like it's one thing after the other. And how do we pick what we fight? How do we pick our battles in your mind?
Woo, people are tired. They're tired of the bad. They tired of, can you pitch in $5? They tired of even some of the good. They just don't even care. They don't want to hear about it. The fact sheets, the PDFs. And so that's a very real thing. I think Dr. Brown mentioned something about those who are engaged, and that's really key because a lot of people aren't engaged. I remember I was in Florida. I was at this little, I'll just say hole in the wall. I ain't going to say some other adjectives. I'll say hole in the wall. And it was a predominantly white crowd. And I noticed that some people don't give a damn about, what Ron DeSantis is talking about, or even what Trump is talking about. They just up in there getting their little $4 beers, singing Journey or whatever situation. I don't recognize a lot of the songs, so I don't listen to that kind of music. But they're just living their life. And so seeing that, it really brought home to me how there are people that are just out there getting by. They're not checked in. They're not engaged. Whatever's happening, they don't feel like it moves the needle in their personal life beyond the fact that they just want to go get a beer on Saturday with their friends. Okay. And so how do you connect to those people? That's a little bit harder of a lift. But when we are talking and we are having these conversations, we have to connect the dots each and every time. There's been a lot of discussion lately about Keke Palmer having a little bit of butt cheeks out over, under her little sheer overlay at the Usher concert, or, the girls twerking at the Essence Fest. And I said, okay, well, let's pivot. We can have that conversation, but if we're talking about what advances our community, let's talk about legislation. Let's talk about what Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and all these other trash governors and Republican candidates are doing around the country. And so we have to recognize what gets people attention and pivot, connect the dots. What are people taking away from the things that have their attention? Carly Russell, what the takeaway is, well, they don't care about black people missing, or they're not going to care anymore. Well, they haven't been caring. That's why every day when Roland Martin does Black and Missing, y'all don't share the Black and Missing. Y'all don't pick up the phone and call the police. Y'all don't sit up there and go search for these people. So we have to find out what are people already talking about, and let's use that to leverage people's attention and change the conversation a little bit. We ain't got to talk about all the deep stuff all the time, but while we're talking about this, let's connect this dot and let's have this conversation. If we can do that enough times, maybe some people will start to get it a little bit more. We don't need everybody. We just need to pick up some of the margins. So that's what Republicans get. You pick up the margins or you pick off the margins and they win. We do the same, we win.
Absolutely, and few do that, taking that as a point of entry and bringing out the bigger issues better than you do. In fact, I don't know anybody who does. As Stanley Crouch said of Jack Johnson, genius is the ability to make the difficult thing look simple, but you all just got a class in how important it is to be able to make that thing that looks trivial a point of entry for the larger issues. So thank you for walking us through that. Reese.
Thank you, Dr. Carr.
No, of course. Look, thank you. So much is happening, in fact, in Florida, as we said, from voting rights, groups suing Governor Ron DeSantis and others over alleged voter intimidation, a federal judge refusing to block 2 parts of the new Florida election law that placed restrictions on voter registration groups. We want to be walked through that and get a little bit clearer focus on what's going on and how we're fighting back in the Sunshine State. So we're joined now by Nikki Fried, the chair of Florida's Democratic Party, and she joins us to discuss everything that's happening in the Sunshine State. Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered, Chairwoman Fried.
Thanks for having me on tonight to talk about such an important issue, not just for Florida, but as we all know that so much of this insanity and this extremism starts here, and it is going across the rest of the country. So we are ground zero here in Florida, and we are going to continue to fight back. No question. Well, please, we know that I think yesterday in federal court there was a suit filed saying that the DeSantis administration purposely did not fulfill the requirements of the 2018 Amendment 4. We know what the people voted for. We know what they wanted, and we know what the state is doing. Walk us through this as maybe as a point of entry, and then kind of expand it out and help us understand the implications for everybody in the country. Yeah, so Amendment 4 was passed in 2018 when I was on the ballot that year running for Commissioner of Agriculture, being the only statewide elected Democrat that kind of finished the finish line that year. But we all voted for it, and it wasn't just a Democratic issue. It was overwhelmingly voted on by the people here in our state, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. And what it was doing is to fix a problem that's happening here in our state in the clemency process of returning citizens after they have served their time. And as a past public defender, I fought really hard for Amendment 4 in 2018. And then as our commissioner, as a member of the Florida cabinet, member of the clemency, I watched and fought in 2019 when the Republican Party implemented the modern day Jim Crow laws, making it nearly impossible for over 1.4 million returning citizens that would be eligible to get back onto the rolls. And so what they did was, it wasn't just enough to make people pay back the restitution, which I agree with, that if you have harmed an individual, then you have an obligation to pay back that restitution. The issue comes into court costs and fines that are levied in association with your criminal case. And a good chunk of public defenders, and I certainly would encourage if anybody is a public defender watching this, always be doing this, that at the end of any of the plea agreements to be asking for court costs and fees to be moved to a civil judgment and not to carry with the criminal case. But that hasn't happened in a vast majority of cases in the historical aspects of Florida. So now you have people all across our state that now have to go through an additional hoop in order to get their rights back. And most of the times, people don't even know where to find the information to make sure that you are paying off your court costs and your fines. And some are people that can't afford it to begin with. So moving forward, in the clemency process, I continue to bring up we need to do it better in the clemency, not just in Florida statutes. But unfortunately, Ron DeSantis went with the legislature and made the clemency process mirror that of the implementation of the constitutional ballot. So fast forward to 2022, where right before an election, 20 individuals who were returning citizens were arrested for allegedly false for voting when it was not permissible, and it created voter intimidation all across our state. I still am hearing from individuals who are scared to vote, scared to register to vote.
How many minutes? No. Go ahead, Chairwoman Fried. I'm sorry about that.
So basically what's happened is this is not the will of the voters. The will of the voters were to give back people their rights and say, if you've served your time, then you deserve your rights back. You deserve to register to vote and to vote for who is president of the United States and who's governor of our states, that you have the right to run for office, to sit in a jury, which no one wants to do, but that's part of being somebody who is part of the civil process here in our country. But what's happened is that Ron has intentionally made it more difficult to register people to vote, has made it more difficult for returning citizens to get access to the information, to be active participants in the electoral process. And good for our group to come out there and to file a lawsuit on what is, in my mind and in their minds, a violation of individual civil rights.
Chairwoman Fried, thank you for joining us and for updating us. And I want to say, while we have you here, a lot of folk think that the gap between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in power in Florida is a big chasm, but let's not forget that only a few moments ago, in ticks of the electoral clock, it was razor thin, and I think we would have won if they had kept counting those votes. So it's good to know that you're still on the case and the lawsuit has been filed, and thank you for walking us through that and helping us understand that we will not be intimidated. And again, Florida in so many ways is the tip of the spear. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on today.
Of course. Nikki Fried, Chair of Florida's Democratic Party. We will be back here at Roland Martin Unfiltered in a moment. We'll toss the break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up and still stay in the state of Florida with the grand pole mark of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Back in a moment here, Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
My early days on the road, I've learned, well, first of all, as a musician, I studied not only piano, but I was also drummer and percussion. I was all city percussion as well. So I was one of the best in the city on percussion.
There you go.
Also studied trumpet, cello, violin, and bass, and any other instrument I could get my hand on. And with that study, I learned again what was for me. I learned what it meant to do what the instruments in the orchestra meant to each other in the relationships.
Right.
So that prepared me to be a leader. That prepared me to lead orchestras and to conduct orchestras. That prepared me to know, to be a leader of men, they have to respect you and know that you know the music. You have to be the teacher of the music. You have to know the music better than anybody.
There you go.
Right, so you can't walk in unprepared.
Next on The Frequency with me, Dee Barnes, actress, writer, and advocate Redrawn Chong is here to discuss her childhood and break down her life in Hollywood, a show you don't want to miss.
Well, even at my peak when I was getting a lot of stuff, as soon as I was working a ton, I heard people whispering, oh, we don't want to pay her because we're giving her a break.
Only on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
I'm Faraji Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
This is Essence Atkins.
It's the Love King of R&B, Raheem Devon.
It's me, Sherry Shepard, and you know what you watch.
You're watching Roland Martin, Unfiltered.
Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. We're going to stay in Florida. We're going to stay with some of these racist policies that the governor has been putting in place. Governor Ron DeSantis, aided and abetted by his supermajority in the legislature. The NAACP and other groups have already issued travel advisories for the state of Florida for the insensitive, discriminatory, and racist policies being promoted by Governor Ron DeSantis and his allies. But this week, one of the oldest black fraternities, I think it's the second oldest black fraternity coming out of Indiana University, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, is holding its annual conference in Tampa, Florida. Brother Brown, they're near you, and they're joining the coalition of organizations in solidarity against those policies. Joining us from Tampa is Reuben A. Shelton III, the 34th International Grand Polemarch of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered, Polemarch Shelton. How's it going down there in Florida, man? Y'all staying cool?
It's raining like crazy.
Oh no, are you serious right now?
Yeah, I'm looking out a window right now and it's pouring down, but we're good.
That's all right. The nukes can't be stopped. At least that's been my experience with y'all. So tell us what's going on. You have called for some action, and I'm sure your fraternity brother and one of the great influences on me and so many others, untold others, the great Lerone Bennett Jr. is smiling from the ancestral realm when he knows what the stances you all take. Walk us through what's going on down there and how you all are approaching fighting back.
Well, it was just important that we send a message today, that we have a press conference to the public, to our members at large, that we want to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters down here in the Tampa area. You know, they're going through something right now, and they need all the help that we can possibly give. You know, we're part of the D9 organization, and as part of the D9, we always have this phrase that says we're better together. And as an organization, the National Panhellenic Council, we have gotten together to show our support for what is going on with our brothers and sisters down here in Tampa. But because the Kappas are in town today, we wanted to make sure that we as an organization made it very, very clear that we don't like what's going on, and we want to help. We want to help the people in Tampa and the people in Florida, fight these horrendous actions by the governor.
Absolutely. I want to go to our panel so we can get some folk in the conversation, including somebody that's not too far from where you all are right now. Dr. Brown, particularly given what's going on with the advanced placement course, we've seen some of that here in the District of Columbia area. Some of the teachers who are going to teach next fall were actually here last week for the College Board's intensive to really grapple with the case. Any questions you have for Paul Mark Shelton as we're thinking about what the stand that Kappa has taken?
Yeah, well, first I just want to welcome Kappa Alpha Psi to Tampa. I'm a proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And
all right.
I know our grand boss, Ricky Lewis, was down here. But I think it's great how these organizations are lending their support and making it clear of where they stand and what expectations they have. I think it's important to do that for a number of reasons. One, I think it really does tell the local folks that they're not alone. The head of the Florida Democratic Party, or whatnot, she said previously that that this is ground zero, and it certainly feels like it. It feels like everything is happening here first, and then other states are picking up on that and running with it and taking it to their own states. And so for folks to come down here and show their displeasure with what's going on speaks volumes as it pertains to how we view or how we believe we're being viewed by the rest of the country. Oftentimes, sometimes a lot of people that I've talked to here feel as though they're being forgotten about, that no one really cares what's going on in Florida, or they just write Florida off. But the fact of the matter is that many people are watching and many people are concerned and want to show that concern.
Exactly. And we have partnered with the local NAACP chapter here. We've also partnered with the Urban League, the local Urban League office down here. We've got the incoming president of the National Bar Association, who is also a Kappa. He's here, and he was part of the press conference, as well as Brother John Jacob, who's a longtime Kappa member and a former president of the National Urban League. He was also a part of the conference. And so we made our displeasure very clear. And we have offered our support, not only our political support, but our financial support to the local organizations down here to help them fight these horrendous acts.
Thank you, Paul Mark Shelton. Reese, we often joke and hear, certainly on this show, as we've had our conversations about everybody gathering, the social gatherings, the Essence Fest, and all. I wonder if you have any questions for Paul Mark Shelton as he reminds us that these organizations were not started as social organizations, but anyway, please, and get out of your way in so y'all can have a conversation.
Thank you, Paul Mark Shelton, for being here. My question is, how have you incorporated civic engagement into your conference this time around? Protesting is obviously great, but then people go back home and they need to be engaged. You have educated, you have successful brothers who are going back home and could make a difference in their community. So has that played a role in your conclave this time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have very strong, successful brothers right here in Florida. And right here in the Tampa area, Brother Les Miller was the longtime chairman of the Tampa City Council. And, we're not just talking the talk and then going home. Again, we're also going to support financially and politically, but we've got strong chapters here in Florida, Orlando, Miami, here in Tampa, Fort Myers. I mean, we're all over the state of Florida, and we are committed through our local chapters to do whatever it takes to help fight these actions. And the local chapters will have the full support of the grand chapter and all of our chapters over the world, and we are literally all over the world. But I mean, we're engaged in this. And I told my brothers today that we're not just paying lip service. We're not just doing this as a photo op or a media hype. This is something that we are totally committed to because, as Brother John Jacob said today, it's happening in Florida. But tomorrow it could be in Missouri, where I live, or in Philadelphia, where our or Pennsylvania, where our international headquarters is situated. So, you got to fight it now, and we are totally into this, and we are totally dedicated to doing just that.
Absolutely. I lived in Philly for almost 20 years, Pomar Shelton, and many a day I passed by the national headquarters there in North Philly on Broad Street, and I think about all the money that you have raised and invested in our young people with scholarships, and for folk who think Greek-led organizations aren't important. There's a reason why Ketanji Brown Jackson was sworn into Delta today, brother. We're far from irrelevant these days, and I say that as a son of Alpha. But Alpha and Kappa, of course, on historically white colleges, but Kappa Alpha Psi is setting an example for all the rest of us in the D9. So thank you for joining us and for taking just a minute out of your time. This is Reuben A. Shelton III, of course, the 34th International Ground Pole Mark of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, currently meeting to his 20,000 or so of that 250,000 that are worldwide in Tampa, although it's raining. So thank you for taking a moment to join us, Pomar Shelton.
Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it.
Of course, brother, of course. We're very happy to have been joined. Again, you're only going to see this on Roland Martin Unfiltered. You're only going to see this kind of coverage and this kind of conversation. And right now you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back after this break.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
It's John Murray, the executive producer of the new Sherry Shepherd Talk Show.
This is your boy, Earthquake.
And you're tuned in to
Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Soraya Barker has been missing from Houston, Texas since July 12, 2023. The 17-year-old is 5 feet, 7 inches tall, weighs 120 pounds with brown hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information about Soraya Barker is urged to call the Harris County, Texas Sheriff's Office at 713-221-6000. That's 713-221-6000. Let's go to the Magnolia State, Mississippi, where its Legislative Black Caucus wants everyone in Rankin County Sheriff's Department involved in the severe police brutality case to be charged. Let's look at the letter here. The black lawmakers sent a letter to State Attorney General Lynn Fitch, to demand action against all those who played a part in the vicious assault against Michael Corey Jenkins and Eddie Terrell Parker. The letter in part says, the Mississippi Legislative Black Caucus, the representative voice of over 1.3 million African Americans and people of color in the state of Mississippi, requests the indictment of all members of the Rankin County Sheriff's Department involved in the brutal torture and assault of Mr. Michael Corey Jenkins and Mr. Eddie Terrell Parker. All parties responsible for these heinous crimes should be held accountable for their actions and should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. For transparency, we urge you to take action and immediately release the investigative findings related to this incident. Jenkins alleged that the deputies placed a gun in his mouth, fired it, and attempted to assault him and Parker with a sex toy during a 2-hour interrogation for suspicion of distribution of drugs. The Department of Justice is investigating the case. We'll continue on now to the Senate Judiciary Committee here in D.C., which approves a new ethics code for the Supreme Court following reports of justices' interactions with wealthy donors. Really? There's gambling? Gambling going on. The line from Casablanca. The legislation imposes new ethics rules on the court, including new standards for transparency around recusals, gifts, and potential conflicts of interest. While Democrats have pushed for the legislation, Republicans are vehemently opposed, arguing that it could, quote, destroy the high court, really. Even though it has little chance of passing the Senate, Democrats say enforceable standards on the court are necessary. The bill would mandate a new Supreme Court, quote, code of conduct, end quote, with a process for adjudicating the policy modeled on lower courts that do have ethics codes. It would also improve transparency around gifts received by justices and set up a process to investigate and enforce violations. Oh, Lord, let's go to my home. Well, no, is it my home state? I don't know. Country Music Television is removing country singer Jason Aldean's song, Try That in a Small Town, from its rotation amidst growing backlash. The song, which contains violent news footage and provocative lyrics, sparked controversy and accusations of promoting violence. Many celebrities and musicians are calling him out. The View's Sonny Hostin explains why Aldean's video choices were intentional.
Him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm pleased that you are, and I'm pleased that you are.
You do agree that he should be allowed to say whatever he wants.
Because as a lawyer, when I put my legal hat on, I don't believe in censorship. Right. However, this man is from Macon, Georgia. My father's from Augusta, Georgia, and Macon, Georgia. I spent many summers there. Yeah, both. I spent many summers there. It is one of the most racist places in this country. So don't tell me that he knew nothing about what that imagery meant and what he. So I don't give him the benefit.
But I'm saying, along with him, more people should also be held accountable. The other thing is that what was evoked for me, which was, you're not going to get out of this town, are those sundown don't let the sun areas go down on your ass.
Because there were times when black people, my mother's in the audience today, thank you for coming. And my mother and father, because they were an interracial couple, were run out of South Carolina by the KKK. And my father is still scarred from that experience, and you are still scarred from that experience. So
we're all still scarred from that experience.
So don't tell me that not only was he aware of what he was doing by using that imagery, he embraces that imagery. And unfortunately, this became the #1 song on U.S. iTunes. We have a problem in this country about race, and the biggest problem is we refuse to admit that it exists.
Well, don't you?
Thank you, Sonny. Because in that song, Aldean calls out the 2020 Black Lives Matter protest after the deaths of George Floyd and threatens for protesters to try that in his small town. By the way, shout out to the 10th anniversary of Black Lives Matter around the country this weekend. I was in Los Angeles with a frequent guest here at Roland Martin Unfiltered, part of the Black Lives Matter LA coalition out there. And it's very important to understand that, he's challenging that. Here are a few of the lyrics. Let's look at his lyrics. Quote, sucker punch somebody on a sidewalk, carjack an old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. Y'all think it's cool? Well, act like a fool if you like. Cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag and light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough. Well, try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. The music video for Try That in a Small Town was filmed in front of the Maury County Courthouse, where the 1946 Columbia race riot began. It's not too far from Nashville, actually. And about 20 black boys and men were lynched, further drawing criticism and raising concerns about the message. Pulling the song from CMT's rotation comes after widespread criticism from online users and advocacy groups. Aldean defended the song, saying that the references made are, quote, not only meritless but dangerous. He posted this take on Twitter. In the past 24 hours, I've been accused of releasing a pro-lynching song, a song that has been out since May, and was subject to the comparison that I, direct quote, was not too pleased with the nationwide Black Lives Matter protests. There is not a single lyric in the song that references race or points to it. There isn't a single video clip that isn't real news footage. And while I can try and respect others to have their own interpretations of a song with music, this one has gone too far. So I guess you don't want people to try it in a small town, but you can't say it with your chest. Reese, help us. Wrestle with this country music man who's decided that you shouldn't try that in a small town, but he can't own up to what he said. I don't know. Let me get out of your way. What you got to say about this, Reese?
Well, you do make a good point. Billy Badass can't even stand 10 toes down in his funky ass little song. He sounded like RFK Jr. to me, right? Like, you laid out the evidence, and then he turned around and said, oh, no, everybody got it wrong. I don't fucking think so. Don't try what in a small town? What? What do y'all have going on that's so great? Let's talk about poverty. Let's talk about y'all missing teeth. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to shame people for missing teeth, getting their legs amputated because they ain't got no hospitals because they keep voting Republican who's shutting down all the rural hospitals. Let's talk about a lot of stuff. Y'all got violence. Y'all got poverty. Y'all ain't got no jobs. You ain't got shit to do. That's why you got time to make this raggedy song to gas up people while you live in your mansion somewhere, I don't know, Nashville or Beverly Hills, who knows where you live. You gassing up the small town people to really inflict violence against each other because a lot of these small towns ain't got nobody but white people in it going at it with each other. And so I just think it's really funny how you Billy Badass in the lyrics, but you don't have that same energy when it's time to answer to what you're putting out there in the universe. Okay?
Absolutely.
The small towns ain't all that great, and ain't nobody trying to try nothing in your small town because ain't nobody trying to. So you're all right, Jason Aldean.
No question. Well, it's funny, Reese, as you're talking about it, and of course, I read the earlier story about the Judiciary Panel in SCOTUS. It seems like it's always two sets of rules. I mean, you talking all that, but what kind of sense or not do you make out of these recent revelations about these trips and these expensive, putting ice from a glacier in your drink, or, I mean, why are there several sets of rules going on here in this country? I mean, especially when it comes to the U.S. Supreme Court and ethics.
Well, why not? Who gonna check them?
No question. You need to make that on a T-shirt.
You have a moral compass.
You need to put that on a T-shirt. Who gonna check me, boo? No question.
Who gonna check? That's what Sheree said from Real. You don't watch Real Housewives, but you might know the reference. But Sheree said that. But who gonna check them? There are people that do because of their moral compass, because of their ethics, because they're gonna go above and beyond to be above reproach. And there are people that are on the Supreme Court. Okay, and so if you are above the law, if you make the laws, if you pick and choose what applies to you, a lot of people are gonna take advantage of that. That's human nature. Okay. So none of this activity really surprises me. The only thing that surprises me is that people still look at the Supreme Court as a legitimate institution. The people on it, half of them, aside from the good ones, ain't shit. They pick and choose what the world's going to be, finger in the wind, depending on what benefits them. And so I think it's past time to stop taking them seriously and start talking about reforming the court or just ignoring it altogether, like what them Republicans down there in Alabama are doing, and keep testing the waters. How far can I get them more ignoring the Supreme Court? Don't worry about the whole, it's going to be chaos and this, rule of law, blah, blah, blah. The rule of law don't mean shit to Republicans. It's about time that we start recognizing that it's only being used to subjugate and keep us in the same place while they run all over us.
Absolutely. Dr. Brown, it's funny listening to Reese walk through that and raise this issue that these folks are not going to back off unless we make them. I mean, I know in your classroom every day you're walking students, community members through how this kind of racial terror has manifested itself. And for this guy to stand in front of a courthouse where the famous Columbia race rioter, I think about our colleagues Linda Wynn and Learotha Williams and others at Tennessee State and other places teach this every day, you know, how much of this stoking to terror, you know, whether it be what happened in Mississippi, where you see the violation of these brothers, or what this guy is kind of putting out there, you know, what kind of message are folk trying to send in this country at this point when it comes to just violating black folk?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, on the one hand, with the song, I think that it's ridiculous how people are playing this song, and it's crazy how many downloads this song has had. I think that's really appalling and really an indictment on our society on that hand. On the other hand, I wish he was 10 toes down with this. I wish he did literally just come out and say how you feel.
Come on.
So that we know and we understand. And it's blatantly clear where you stand, so we know what category to put you in and we know what's really going on. I think it will help a lot of black folks see the light if these folks were just blatant about it, but instead they're throwing rocks and then hiding their hands afterwards. And what's really happening is they're coding this message, coding this song so that people can play it outright and say, oh, it's not racist, even though there are clear racial undertones and some overtones when you're talking about you're not going to make it out of this town. Like, that is a clear reference to lynching, right? And so on the one hand, I think it's crazy how people are still playing this. On the other hand, thank you for showing us who you are, so I know not to mess with you.
No question. No question, Doc. No question. It really is something, isn't it? I mean, almost 6 million views in 6 days on YouTube, growing his base, no question. But, you know, you're talking about a small town. I wish he could have been out there on the stage on L.A. in Saturday with Chuck D and Melina Abdullah and our brother Faraji Muhammad, who was covering it out there at the Black Star Network, Cornel West, Tavis Smiley, and thousands of black folk from all over standing there. Why don't you come get on this stage and say that in Lamert Park, bruh? But since you can't say it with your chest, I guess you can't really be bothered with that. So we're going to come back with our final segment in a moment. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, you're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
For decades, the tobacco industry has deliberately targeted black communities and kids with marketing for menthol cigarettes. It's had a devastating impact on black health. Tobacco use claims 45,000 black lives every year. It's the #1 cause of preventable death. In the 1950s, less than 10% of black smokers used menthol cigarettes. Today, it's 85%. Menthol cools and numbs the throat, making it easier for kids to start smoking. Menthol also increases addiction, making it harder for smokers to quit. Menthol cigarettes are a big reason why black Americans have a harder time quitting smoking and die at higher rates from smoking-related diseases like cancer, heart disease, and stroke. It's time to stop big tobacco from profiting off black lives. An FDA ban on menthol cigarettes will improve black health, save lives, and protect future generations from addiction. Learn more at tobaccofreekids.org/ban menthol.
Carl Payne pretended to be Roland Martin. Holla!
You ain't got to wear black and gold every damn place, okay? Ooh, I'm an alpha, yay. All right, you're 58 years old. It's over.
And you are now watching
Roland Martin Unfiltered.
uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable.
I'm sorry, y'all. You got me caught laughing at these comedians. Oh, my God. You're welcome. You're back with Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. Again, remember to download the app, support the Black Star Network, smash the damn like button. And as you saw there in the public service announcement that preceded the comedians, we are going to talk about a very serious issue right now. Tobacco-related illness is still the primary cause of death for African Americans. For decades, it is commonly known that menthol makes smoking easier to start and harder to quit. More than 85% of African American smokers prefer menthols. This predominant use of menthols among African American smokers is well documented among public health authorities. Yolanda Richardson, President and CEO of Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, is here to explain why eliminating menthol cigarettes is critical to health equity and Black health. President Richardson, thank you so much for joining us here on Roland Martin.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
The pleasure is ours, and this is such an incredible, important. All my older cousins seem to smoke cools, and menthol is something that I'm well familiar with, but fortunately only because of secondhand smoking. I wish it wasn't even that. But talk to us about some of these statistics are just shocking. Can you walk us through how much of a crisis this is in our community?
It's a crisis of 45,000 lives a year. 45,000 Black Americans die because of menthol cigarettes. That's the truth of the matter. And it's a result of very intensive marketing by the tobacco industry in our community. Unlimited amounts of advertising dollars going there, free samples, marketing, sponsoring cultural events. It's all been a part of a very concerted effort to push menthol cigarettes in our communities. And the result is that we die. And when we don't die, we lead unhealthy lives because of asthma or cardiovascular health problems or a whole range of tobacco-related death and illness. So it is a crisis, but we have an opportunity to change that. As you know, the FDA has just drafted a rule that would allow that would prohibit menthol in cigarettes going forward. Now, what we have to do as a community is to get them to release that rule and then to enforce it.
Absolutely. I mean, again, just, thinking about the policy changes we have to make and thinking about the addictive nature of this. Any thoughts on, the relationship between marketing and this type of crisis? I remember many years ago reading Manning Marable's book, How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America, and he talks about how the soda companies marketed red pop and orange pop, and then these question of colors. And then I think about even young people. I saw a lot of Black and Miles around in LA. I see them on the streets of Philly, here in DC, and in the report it talks about how these young people are smoking these flavored kind of things. I mean, how much, what's the nexus between advertising and addiction and these marketing, these flavors in Black communities? Is there something to that?
Well, there's an absolute causal link. And, the more they market in our communities and the more they put the products in our community, the more accessible they are. The images have been that, smoking cigarettes is cool. It's something that they encouraged young people to do. And then it's just everywhere in our communities. I can remember many occasions when I went to Black cultural events and there were free samples everywhere of menthol cigarettes, handouts. They also make sure that the prices are low in our community. So it is an aggressive marketing effort to addict us and to keep us addicted. And therefore, the consequence of that very much is increased rates of ill health in our community and death. It's as simple as that.
Yes, ma'am. We're going to go to our panel. And Dr. Brown, any questions for Yolanda Richardson, President and CEO of Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids?
Yeah, I do have a question. When it comes to when we see the disparities of people that are addicted to these cigarettes and smoking menthol cigarettes, is there any type of, I would say, could we sue these tobacco companies the way in which we've seen in the past? We've seen different people who are addicted to tobacco be able to sue, and I'm sure these tobacco companies have then restructured themselves. But given the disproportionate sort of rates in which Black people are are addicted to menthol specifically, is there anything we can do in that realm?
Well, I think we have an immediate and short-term sort of approach to this, and that is really to put pressure on FDA to get them off the market. That's the most important and short-term and most effective thing that we can do. The rule is drafted, it's ready for release, and we should just continue to pressure FDA to do it. When the law was crafted in 2009, it specifically exempted menthol while it banned other flavored tobacco products. And so we have for 17 years since 2009 let menthol cigarettes stay on the streets while the tobacco industry has continued to target our community, other vulnerable communities, but specifically our community. And we have a very, very immediate way to address this problem. And so it requires our political leaders to step up and say, this has to be done, and it needs to be done now.
Thank you, Doc. Reese, please, floor is yours.
Yes, I'm skeptical of the counter argument to this ban. Most of it being rooted in the criminal justice argument that this will criminalize Black people more frequently, even though the ban doesn't call for individual enforcement. For people who might be swayed by that argument, what is your answer to that particular argument?
Well, I would say that menthol cigarettes are the leading cause of death for Black people. And I would say that 45,000 Black people die every year. And I would say that we can walk and chew gum. We can continue to speak out against over-policing in our communities. It's absolutely critical that we do so. But we can also say that we do not want these products in our community because they kill too. And they kill at a much higher rate. And I just think that many in our community aren't aware at the deliberate efforts of the tobacco industry to put these products in our community. I think that would give people much more pause if they knew how much this was a concerted effort to keep us addicted. And it's as much a civil rights issue as anything else that we face, because we don't need to be dying because the tobacco industry has decided that we're an easy target audience. And it's as simple as that, I think.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yes, absolutely. Ms. Richardson, I hope you don't mind if I ask a question or two as it relates to how we might look at this in a global context. I know you've done a lot of work globally between Africa and some other things. Are there connections as these tobacco companies attempt to pivot in terms of their profit margins? I mean, could you help put this in an international context even?
Yeah, very smart question. As you probably heard, saw from my bio, I spent the largest part of my career working on global issues. And at the campaign, I specifically oversaw our global programs. And so what clearly happened, and it's in all of the the annual reports and marketing materials of the tobacco industry, that when regulation tightened in richer countries, they started looking for markets overseas. And they started targeting countries where there were not great regulatory schemes in place and where they knew that they would be underregulated. And that's been very successful. So the largest number of smokers exists most in Asian countries just because of the large numbers. But we have been, over the last several years, also focused on Africa because we wanted to make sure that they didn't dump all of their products in Africa when their markets started to dry up in Europe and in the United States. So we've been trying to be on the front end of that epidemic. And in many ways, we've made some real strides because, fortunately, Africans did not smoke at the same rates as other parts of developing worlds. So we feel really good about that. But it's an ongoing value. They're going to be always looking for new markets. And if they can't find new markets, they'll just continue to try to addict our kids. So we need to remain vigilant both here and abroad to make sure that they don't have an opportunity to keep marketing these products. There just isn't any upside to cigarettes.
No question. Yeah, there was one thing that I mean, in reading through the kind of short white paper from the CDC, how do you explain why people who identify as LGBT who smoke are more likely to smoke menthol than heterosexual people who smoke? I mean, I was trying to make sense of that. Is there overlap between class, race? I mean, what's your best thinking about that?
Yeah, sure. There are all kinds of overlaps, the ones that you've talked about. But, also, again, don't forget the one consistent strand in all of this is industry market. they look for vulnerable communities. And communities that have stressful existence are often more likely to smoke. And so therefore, what is the tobacco industry going to do? They're going to go to those communities where they feel that there's vulnerabilities and try to move the market for their products, because they feel like those communities would not be wouldn't have the resources or the information systems, et cetera, that will protect them. So I'm just concerned that we do our homework and make sure we're not being easy pawns in their game of death and disease.
Absolutely. Vulnerability, the most vulnerable get preyed on. I mean, it's not just about cigarettes. You really have used this as a point of entry to help us understand how this world works. I tell you, Yolanda Richardson, President and CEO of Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope we come out of this not only educated, but determined to stop this scourge. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Take good care.
Oh, thank
Good
you.
night.
You as well. You as well. Well, we reached the end of Roland Martin Unfiltered for Thursday night. I'll be able to exhale in a few minutes, but not before I thank my ride or die, my sister, Reese Colbert, as always. And Dr. Brown, it's good to have you with us, brother, down there. We had to come see you. We're going to have to scourge up some folk to come work at the U of F, man. Y'all can't have open positions and people not coming down there. Don't be scared. So thank you both for letting me be a little less nervous as a result. Plus,
excellent job, Dr. Carr. I want to see you in that host chair more often.
Oh, no, you're going to sit right here when Roland can't come. No, hey, sis, we love you. So thank you so much for joining us. And as Roland Martin might say, and would definitely say, at the end of the show, holla.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches. I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland. Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair, take your seat at the Black Table with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.